Welcome again to my channel, guys. This is Trev from Essence, and today we are going to continue the reading of Spare by the one and only Prince Harry. Now, if you were with us last night, we started reading this book and it was absolutely fascinating. And so today we are going to continue reading it until it's all done. I hope you all enjoy the reading and I hope you all enjoy the content. I am enjoying it to the max, and I hope you are too. Now we are on to chapter 4. And if you have not yet read the book yourself and you don't mind listening to me read it, you are absolutely welcomed. We have already read chapters 1 through 3. So if you want to continue with us, you might want to go back and listen to that one from last night so that you can catch up. But this morning, we are going to continue with chapter 4. And here we go. It was Sunday, so, as always, we went to church. Craty Kirk, walls of granite, large roof of Scottish pine, stained glass windows, donated decades earlier by Victoria. Perhaps they atone for the upset she caused in worshipping there. Something about the head of the Church of England worshipping in the Church of Scotland. It caused a stir, which I never understood. I've seen photographs of us going into the church that day, but they bring back no memories. Did the minister say anything? Did he make it worse? Did I listen to him or stare at the back of the pew and think about Mommy? On the way back to Balmoral, a 2-minute drive, it was suggested that we stop. People had been gathering all morning outside the front gates. Some had begun leaving things, stuffed animals, flowers, cards, acknowledgement should be made. We pulled over, stepped out. I could see nothing but a matrix of colored dots, flowers, and more flowers. I could hear nothing but a rhythmic clicking from across the road. The press. I reached for my father's hand for comfort, then cursed myself because that gesture set off an explosion of clicks. I'd given them exactly what they wanted: emotion, drama, pain. They fired and fired and fired. Hours later, Pa left for Paris, accompanied by Mommy's sister, Aunt Sarah, and Aunt Jane. They needed to learn more about the crash, someone said, and they needed to arrange for the return of Mommy's body. Body? People kept using that word. It was a punch in the throat and a bloody lie because Mommy wasn't dead. That was my sudden insight, with nothing to do but roam the castle and talk to myself. A suspicion took hold, which then became a firm belief. This was all a trick, and for once the trick wasn't being played by the people around me or the press, but by Mommy. Her life's been miserable. She has been hounded, harassed, lied about, lied to. So she's staged an accident as a diversion and ran away. The realization took my breath away, made me gasp with relief. Of course, it's all a ruse, so she can make a clean start. At this very moment, she's undoubtedly renting an apartment in Paris or arranging fresh flowers in her secretly purchased log cabin somewhere way up high in the Swiss Alps. Soon, soon, she'll send for me and Willie. It's all so obvious. Why didn't I see it before? Mommy isn't dead. She's hiding. Hey, Evelyn, how are you doing, my love? So good to see you. Thank you for stopping by, my dear sister. I felt so much pain. Then doubt crept in. Hang on. Mommy would never do this to us. This unspeakable pain. She'd never allow that. let alone cause it. Then back to relief. She had no choice. It was her only hope of freedom. Then doubt again. Mommy wouldn't hide. She's too much of a fighter. Then relief. This is her way of fighting. She'll be back. She has to be. It's my birthday in 2 weeks. But Pa and my aunts came back first. Their return was reported by every TV channel. The world watched as they stepped onto the tarmac at RAF Northolt. One channel even added music to the arrival, someone more mournfully singing a psalm. Willie and I were kept from the TV, but I think we heard that. The next few days passed in a vacuum, no one saying anything. We all remained ensconced inside the castle. It was like being inside a crypt, except a crypt where everyone's wearing shoes and keeping to normal routines and schedules. If anyone talked about anything, I didn't hear them. The only voice I heard was the one droning in my head, arguing with itself. She's gone. No, she's hiding. She's dead. No, she's playing dead. Then, one morning, it was time. Back to London. I remember nothing about the trip. Did we drive? Did we fly on the royal flight? I can see the reunion with Pa and the aunts and the pivotal encounter with Aunt Sarah, though it's wreathed in fog and might be slightly out of sequence. At times, my memory places it right there in those hurried first days of September, but at other times, memory casts it forward to many years later. Whenever it happened like this. William, Harry, Aunt Sarah has something for you boys. She stepped forward, holding two tiny blue boxes. What's this? Open it. I lifted off the top of my blue box. Inside was a moth. No, a mustache. No, what? Her hair, Harry. Aunt Sarah explained that while in Paris, she had clipped 2 locks from Mommy's hair, so there it was, proof she's really gone. But then immediately came the reassuring doubt, the life-saving uncertainty. No, this could be anybody's hair. Mommy, her beautiful blonde hair intact, was out there somewhere. I'd know if she wasn't. My body would know. My heart would know. And neither knows any such thing. Both were just as full of love for her as ever. Willie and I walked up and down the crowds outside Kensington Palace, smiling, shaking hands, as if we were running for office. Hundreds and hundreds of hands were thrusted continually into our faces, the fingers often wet. From what? I wondered. Tears, I realized. I disliked how those hands felt. More, I hated how they made me feel. Guilty. Why were all these people crying when I wasn't and hadn't? I wanted to cry, and I'd tried to, because Mommy's life had been so sad that she had felt the need to disappear, to invent this massive charade, but I couldn't squeeze out one drop. Maybe I'd learned too well, absorbed too deeply the ethos of family, that crying wasn't an option, ever. I remember the mounds of flowers all around us. I remember feeling unspeakable sorrow and yet being unfailingly polite. I remember old ladies saying, "Oh my, how polite, the poor boy." I remember muttering thanks over and over. Thank you for coming. Thank you for saying that. Thank you for camping out here for several days. I remember consoling several folks who were prostrate, overcome, as if they knew Mommy, but also thinking, you don't, though. You act as if you did, but you really didn't know her. That is, you don't know her. Present tense. After offering ourselves up to the crowds, we went inside Kensington Palace. We entered through two big black doors into Mummy's apartment, went down a long corridor and into a room off the left. There stood a large coffin, dark brown, English oak, as I remember or imagining that it was draped in Union Jack. That flag mesmerized me, maybe because of my boyish war games, maybe because of my precocious patriotism, or maybe because I'd been hearing rumblings for days about the flag, the flag, the flag. That was all anyone could talk about. People were up in arms because the flag hadn't been lowered to half staff over Buckingham Palace. They didn't care that the royal standard never flew at half mast, no matter what, that it flew when Granny was in residence and didn't fly when she was away. Full stop. They cared only about seeing some official showing of mourning, and they were enraged by its absence. That is, they were whipped into rage by the British papers, which were trying to deflect attention from their role in Mummy's disappearance. I recall one headline, addressed pointedly at Granny. Show us you care. How rich, coming from the same fiends who cared so much about Mummy that they chased her into a tunnel from which she never emerged. By now, I'd overheard this official version of events. Pops chased Mummy through the streets of Paris, then into a tunnel where her Mercedes crashed into a wall or cement pillar, killing her, her friend, and the driver. Standing before the flag-draped coffin, I asked myself, is Mummy a patriot? What does Mummy really think of Britain? Has anyone bothered to ask her? When will I be able to ask her myself? I can't recollect anything the family said in that moment to each other or to the coffin. I don't recall a word that passed between me and Willie, though I did remember people around us saying, the boys, look, shell-shocked. Nobody bothered to whisper, as if we were so shell-shocked that we had gone deaf. The amazing M&G's in the house, and it's me, Lori, is in the place. How are you all doing, guys? Good morning. Thank you all so much for stopping by as we continue to read Harry's Spare. Nobody bothered to whisper, as if we were so shell-shocked that we had gone deaf. There was some discussion about the next day's funeral. Per the latest plan, the funeral would be pulled through the streets on a horse-drawn carriage by the king's troop, while Willie and I followed on foot. It seemed a lot to ask of two young boys. Several adults were aghast. Mummy's brother, Uncle Charles, raised hell. You can't make these boys walk behind their mother's coffin. It's barbaric. An alternative plan was put forward. Willie would walk alone. He was 15 after all. Leave the younger one out of it. Spare the spare. This alternative plan was sent up the chain. Back came the answer. It must be both princes. To garner sympathy, presumably. Uncle Charles was furious, but I wasn't. I didn't want Willie to undergo an ordeal like that without me. Had the roles been reversed, he'd never have wanted me, indeed allowed me, to go it alone. So, come morning, bright and early, off we went, all together. Uncle Charles on my right, Willie to his right, followed by Grandpa, and on my left was Pa. I noted at the start how serene Grandpa looked, as if this was merely another royal engagement. I could see his eyes clearly because he was gazing straight ahead. They all were, but I kept mine down on the road. So did Willie. I remember feeling numb. I remember clenching my fist. I remember keeping a fraction of Willie always in the corner of my vision and drawing loads of strength from that. Most of all, I remember the sounds, the clicking bridles and clopping hooves of the 6 sweaty brown horses, the squeaky wheels of the gun carriage they were hauling. A relic from the First World War, someone said, which seemed right, since Mummy, much as she loved peace, often seemed a soldier, whether she was warring against the Paps or Pa. I believe I'll remember those few sounds for the rest of my life because they were such a sharp contrast to the otherwise all encompassing silence. There wasn't one engine, one lorry, one bird. There wasn't one human voice, which was impossible because 2 million people lined the roads. The only hint that we were marching through a canyon of humanity was the occasional wail. After 20 minutes, we reached Westminster Abbey. We filed into a long pew. The funeral began with a series of readings and eulogies and culminated with Elton John. It's me, Lori. Bantu, how you doing? How are you doing? Abaju, Abaju, how you doing? Let's see who else is here. The amazing MNG is here. The lovely Lori is here. Let's see who else is here. I don't want to miss anybody. Guys, while you are here, welcome everybody into the... Oh, my darling Ricky's here. Six Bows in back is here as well. Welcome, guys. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And those of you who are moderators, please welcome the crew while I read. I thank you so, so, so much. All right, where was I? After 20 minutes, we reached Westminster Abbey. We filed into a long pew. The funeral began with a series of readings and eulogies and culminated with Elton John. He rose slowly, stiffly, as if he was one of the great kings buried for centuries beneath the abbey, suddenly roused back to life. He walked to the front, seated himself at a grand piano. Is there anyone who doesn't know? Who doesn't know that he sang Candle in the Wind, a version he had reworked for Mummy. I can't be sure the notes in my head are from that moment or from clips I've since seen. Possibly they are vestiges of recurring nightmares, but I do have one pure, indisputable memory of the song climaxing and my eyes starting to sting and tears nearly falling. Nearly. Towards the end of the service came Uncle Charles, who used his allotted time to blast everyone, family, nation, press, for stalking Mummy to her death. You could feel the abbey, the nation outside, recoil from the blow. Truth hurts. Then 8 Welsh guards moved forward, hoisted the enormous lead-lined coffin, which was now draped in the royal standard, an extraordinary break with protocol. They had also yielded to pressure and lowered the flag to half-mast. Not the royal standard, of course, but the Union Jack. Still an unprecedented compromise. The royal standard was always reserved for members of the royal family, which, I've been told, Mummy wasn't anymore. Thanks so much. Okay. You all are greeting each other. Oops, oops, oops. Did this mean she was forgiven by Granny? Apparently. But these were questions I couldn't quite formulate, let alone ask an adult. As the coffin was slowly carried outside and loaded into the back of a black hearse, after a long wait, the hearse drove off, rolled steadily through London, which surged on all sides with the largest crowd that ageless city had ever seen, twice as large as the crowds that celebrated the end of the Second World War. It went past Buckingham Palace, up Park Lane, towards the outskirts, over to the Finchley Road, then Henton Way, then the Brent Cross flyover, then the North Circular, then the M1 to Junction 15A, and northwards to Harlestone, before passing through the iron front gate of Uncle Charles's estate, Althorpe. Willie and I watched most of that car ride on TV. We were already at Althorpe. We had been speeded ahead, though it turned out there was no need to hurry. Not only did the hearse go the long way round, it was delayed several times by all the people heaping flowers onto it, blocking the vents and causing the engine to overheat. The driver had to keep pulling over so the bodyguard could get out and clear the flowers off the windscreen. The bodyguard was Graham. Willie and I liked him a lot. We always called him Crackers, as in Graham Crackers. We thought that was hysterical. When the hearse finally got to Althorpe, the coffin was removed again and carried across the pond over a green iron bridge hastily positioned by military engineers to a little island, and there it was placed upon a platform. Willie and I walked across the same bridge to the island. It was reported that Mommy's hands were folded across her chest, and between them was placed a photo of me and Willie, possibly the only two men who ever truly loved her. Certainly the two who loved her most. For all eternity, we'd be smiling at her in the darkness, and maybe it was this image, as the flag came off and the coffin descended to the bottom of the hole, that finally broke me. My body convulsed, and my chin fell, and I began to sob uncontrollably into my hands. I felt ashamed of violating the family's ethos, but I couldn't hold it in any longer. It's okay, I reassured myself. It's okay. There aren't any cameras around. Besides, I wasn't crying because I believed my mommy was in that hole or in that coffin. I promised myself I'd never believe that, no matter what anyone said. No, I was crying at the mere idea. It would just be so unbearably tragic, I thought, if it was actually true. Sister Winsome has arrived. Hey, Sister Winsome and others, welcome. We are on to page 7. Oh, it was page, not chapter. Page 7. Okay, page 7. Then everyone moved on. The family went back to work, and I went back to school, same as I did after every summer holiday. Back to normal, everyone said cheerily. From the passenger seat of Pa's open-topped Aston Martin, everything certainly looked the same. Ludgrove School, nestled in the emerald Berkshire countryside, looked as ever like a country church. Come to think of it, the school motto was from Ecclesiastes: "Whatsoever thy hand findeth to do, do it with thy might." Then again, not many country churches could boast 200 acres of woodland and meadows, sports fields and tennis courts, science labs and chapels, plus a well-stocked library. If you wanted to find me in September 1997, the library would have been the last place to look. Better to check the woods or the sports fields. I was always trying to keep moving, keep busy. I was also most often alone. I liked people. I was gregarious by nature, but just then I didn't want anyone too close. I needed space. That was a tall order, however, at Ludgrove, where more than 100 boys lived in proximity. We ate together, bathed together, slept together, sometimes 10 to a room. Everyone knew everyone's business, down to who was circumcised and who wasn't. We called it Roundheads versus Cavaliers. Okay. And yet, I don't believe one boy so much as mentioned my mother when that new term began. Out of respect? More likely fear. I certainly said nothing to anyone. Days after my return, I had a birthday, September 15th, 1997. I turned 13. My long-standing Ludgrove tradition there would be a cake, sorbet, and I was allowed to choose two flavors. I chose black currant. Winsome, what's up? How you doing? And mango, mommy's favorite. Birthdays were always a huge deal at Ludgrove because every boy and most teachers had a ravenous sweet tooth. There was often a violent struggle for the seat next to the birthday boy. That's where you'd be assured of the first and biggest slice. I don't remember who managed to win the seat beside me. Make a wish, Harry. You want a wish? All right, I wish my mother was, then out of nowhere, Aunt Sarah, holding a box. Open it, Harry. I tore at the wrapping paper, the ribbon. I peered inside. What? Mommy bought it for you. Shortly before. You mean in Paris? Yes, Paris. It was an Xbox. I was pleased. I loved video games. That's the story, anyway. It's appeared. It's appeared in many accounts of my life as gospel, and I have no idea if it's true. Pa said Mommy hurt her head, but perhaps I was the one with brain damage. As a defense mechanism, most likely my memory was no longer recording things quite as it once did. Hey, Bethwa, how are you doing, Bethwa? Good to see you, my dear. Good to see you. Moving along. Despite its two male headmasters, Mr. Gerald and Mr. Marston, both legends, Ludgrove was largely run by women. We call them the matrons. Whatever tenderness we got day to day came from them. The matrons hugged us, kissed us, bandaged our injuries, wiped our tears, all except mine, that is. After that one graveside outburst, I had not cried again. They fancied themselves our surrogates, mums away from mums. They'd always chirp, which had always been odd, but now was especially confusing because of Mummy's disappearance, and also because the matrons were suddenly hot. I had a crush on Miss Roberts. I felt certain I'd marry her one day. I also recall two Miss Lynns. Miss Lynn Major and Miss Lynn Minor. They were sisters. I was deeply smitten with the latter. I reckoned I'd marry her too. 3 times a week, after dinner, the matrons would assist the youngest boys with the nightly wash. I can still see the long row of white baths, each with a boy reclining like a little pharaoh, awaiting his personalized hair washing. For older boys, who had reached puberty, there were 2 tubs in a separate room behind a yellow door. The matrons came down the row of tubs with stiff brushes, bars of floral soap. Every boy had his own towel embossed with his school number. Mine was 116. After shampooing a boy, the matrons would ease back his head, give him a slow and luxurious rinse, confusing as hell. Matrons would also help with the crucial extraction of lice. Outbreaks were common. Nearly every week another boy would come down with a fierce case. We'd all point and laugh. Ha ha, na 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 na, you've got nits. Before long, a matron would be kneeling over the patient, rubbing some solution into his scalp, then scraping out the dead beast with a special comb. Okay. As a 13-year-old, I graduated from matronly bathing assistants, but I still depended on their nightly tuck-ins, still treasured their morning greetings. They were the first faces we saw each day. They swept into our rooms, threw open our curtains. Morning, boys, blary, blary. I'd gaze up into the beautiful visage framed by a halo of sun. Is that, could that be? It never was. The matron I dealt with the most was Pat. Unlike the other matrons, Pat wasn't hot. Pat was cold. Pat was small, mousy, frazzled, and her hair fell greasily into her always tired eyes. Pat didn't seem to get much joy out of life, though she did find two things reliably satisfying: catching a boy somewhere he wasn't supposed to be, and shutting down any bouts of rough housing. Before every pillow fight, we'd put a sentry on the door. If Pat or the headmasters approached, the sentry was instructed to cry, "Goof, goof," Latin, I think. Someone said it meant the head's coming. Someone else said it meant beware. Whichever, when we heard it, you knew to get out of there or pretend to be asleep. Only the newest and stupidest boys would go to Pat with a problem, or worse, a cut. She wouldn't bandage it. She'd poke it with a finger or squirt something into it that hurt twice as much. She wasn't a sadist. She just seemed empathy challenged. Odd, because she knew about suffering. Pat had many crosses to bear. The biggest seemed her knees and spine. The latter was crooked, the former chronically stiff. Walking was hard. Stairs were torture. She'd descend backwards, glacially. Often we'd stand on the landing below her, doing antic dances and making faces. Do I need to say which boy did this with the most enthusiasm? We never worried about Pat catching us. She was a tortoise, and we were free frogs. Still, now and then the tortoise would luck out. She'd lunge, grab a fistful of boy. Ha ha ha! That lad would then be well and trusted and truly, can I say this? Effed. But that's not what's in the book. It's the F word. But I'm just going to say truly effed. Didn't stop us. We went on mocking her as she came down the stairs. The reward was worth the risk. For me, the reward wasn't tormenting poor Pat, but making my mates laugh. It felt so good to make others laugh, especially when I hadn't laughed for months. Maybe Pat knew this. Now and then she'd turn, see me being a perfect ass, and she'd laugh too. That was the best. I loved cracking up my mates, but nothing quite did it for me like making the otherwise miserable Pat bust a gut. We called them grub days. They were Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, I think. Immediately after lunch, we'd key in the corridor along the wall, craning to see just ahead the grub table, piled high with sweets, munches, Skittles, Mars bars, and best of all, opal fruits. I took great offense when opal fruits changed their name to Starburst, pure hearsay, like Britain changing its name. Just the sight of that grub table made us swoon, mouths watering. We'd talk about the impending sugar rush as farmers in a drought talk about the forecast of rain. Meanwhile, I devised a way of supersizing my sugar rush. I take all my opal fruits and squeeze them together into one massive gobstopper, then jam it into the side of my mouth. As the wad melted, my bloodstream would become a frothy cataract of dextrose. Whatever thy hand findeth to do, do it with thy might. The opposite of grub day was letter writing day. Every boy was required to sit down and compose a missive to his parents. At the best of times, that was drudgery. I would barely remember when Pa and Mummy weren't divorced, so writing to them without touching on their mutual grievances, their messy breakup, required the finesse of a career diplomat. Dear Pa, how's Mummy? No. Dear Mummy, Pa says you haven't. No. But after Mummy disappeared, letter writing day became impossible. I've been told that the matrons asked me to write a final letter to Mummy. I have a vague memory of wanting to protest that she was still alive, and yet not doing so, for fear they'd think I was mad. Also, what was the point? Mummy would read the letter when she came out of hiding, so it wouldn't be a total waste of effort. I probably dashed off something pro formal, saying, I miss her, school was fine, so on and so forth. I probably folded it once and handed it to the matron. I remember immediately thereafter regretting that I hadn't taken the writing more seriously. I wished I'd dug deep, told my mother all the things weighing on my heart, especially my regret over the last time we had spoken on the phone. She had called early in the evening, the night of the crash, but I was running around with Willie and my cousins and didn't want to stop playing, so I'd been short with her. Impatient to get back to my games, I'd rushed Mommy off the phone. I wish I'd apologized for it. I wished I'd searched for the words to describe how much I loved her. I didn't know that search would take decades. A month later, it was half term. I was going home at last. Wait, no, I wasn't. Pa apparently didn't want me to spend the break wandering aimlessly around St. James's Palace, where he had been mostly living since his breakup with Mummy, and where Willie and I had lived whenever it was our allotted time with Pa. He feared what I might get up to in that big palace all by myself. He feared I might glimpse a newspaper, overhear a radio. More, he feared I might be photographed through an open window or while playing with my toy soldiers in the garden. He could imagine reporters trying to speak to me, shouting questions. Hey, Harry, do you miss your mom? The nation was in a state of hysteric grief, but the press's hysteria had veered into psychosis. Worst of all, Willie wouldn't be at home to watch over me. He was at Eton. So Pa announced that he'd be taking me with him on a planned work trip to South Africa. South Africa, Pa? Really? Yes, darling boy, Johannesburg. He had a meeting with Nelson Mandela and the Spice Girls. The Spice Girls? I was thrilled and baffled. The Spice Girls, Pa? He explained that the Spice Girls were giving a concert in Johannesburg, so they were calling on President Mandela to pay their respects. Great, I thought. That explains why the Spice Girls are going to be there. What about us? I didn't get it. I'm not sure Pa wanted me to get it. The truth was, Pa's staff hoped a photo of him standing alongside the world's most revered political leader and the world's most popular female musical act would earn him some positive headlines, which he sorely needed. Since Mommy's disappearance, he had been savaged. People blamed him for the divorce and thus for all that followed. His approval rating around the world was single digits. Hi, Irene. How are you? Thank you so much, my love. I sincerely appreciate that. In Fiji, to pick just one example, a national holiday in his honor had been rescinded. Whatever the official reason for the trip, I didn't care. I was just glad to be going along. It was a chance to get away from Britain. Better yet, it was proper time with Pa, who seemed sort of checked out. Not that Pa hadn't always been a bit checked out. He had always given an air of being not quite ready for parenthood. The responsibilities, the patience, the time. Even he, though a proud man, would have admitted as much. But single parenthood, Pa was never made for that. To be fair, he tried. Evenings, I'd shout downstairs, "Going to bed, Pa." He'd always shout back cheerfully, "I'd be there shortly, darling boy." True to his word, minutes later, he'd be sitting on the edge of my bed. He never forgot that I didn't like the dark, so he'd gently tickle my face until I fell asleep. I have the fondest memories of his hands on my cheeks, my forehead, then waking to find him gone, magically, the door always considerably left open a crack. Other than those fleeting moments, however, Pa and I mostly coexisted. He had trouble communicating, trouble listening, trouble being intimate face to face. On occasion, after a long multi-course dinner, I'd walk upstairs and find a letter on my pillow. The letter would say how proud he was of me for something I'd done or accomplished. I'd smile, place it under my pillow, but also wonder why he hadn't said this moments ago while seated directly across from me. Thus, the prospect of days and days of unrestricted part-time was exhilarating. Then came the reality. This was a work trip for Pa and for me. The Spice Girls concert represented my first public appearance since the funeral, and I knew through intuition, through bits of overheard conversations, that the public's curiosity about my welfare was running high. I didn't want to let them down, but I also wanted them all to go away. I remember stepping onto the red carpet, screwing a smile onto my face, suddenly wishing I was in my bed at St. James Palace. Beside me was baby Spice, wearing white plastic shoes with chunky 12-inch platform heels. I fixated on those heels while she fixated on my cheeks. She kept pinching them. So chubby, so cute. Then Posh Spice surged forward and clutched my hand. Farther down the line, I spied Ginger Spice, the only Spice with whom I felt any connection, a fellow Ginger. Also, she was world famous for recently wearing a mini dress made of the Union Jack. Why is there a Union Jack on the coffin? She and the other Spices were cooing at me, saying things I didn't understand, while bantering with the journalists who were shouting at me. Hey guys, how are you doing? Oh, we got newbies in here. Welcome, newbies. How are you doing? Hello, my name is Shabihan. Welcome, Shabihan. Thank you so much for stopping by. I appreciate you. And all my travelers in the chat will give you a nice traveler's welcome while I continue to read. She and the other Spices were cooing at me, saying things I didn't understand, while bantering with the journalists who were shouting at me. "Harry, over here! Harry, Harry, how are you doing, Harry?" Questions that weren't questions, questions that were traps, questions that were flung at my head like cleavers. The journalists didn't give a toss how I was doing. They were trying to get me to say something messy, something newsy. I gazed into their flashes, bared my teeth, and said nothing. If I was intimidated by the flashes, the Spice Girls were intoxicated. Yes, yes, a thousand times yes. That was their attitude every time another flash went off. Fine by me. The more out front they were, the more I could fade into the woodwork. I remember they talked to the press about their music and their mission. I didn't know they had a mission. But one Spice compared the group's crusade against sexism to Mandela's struggle against apartheid. At last, someone said it was time for the concert to begin. Off you go, follow your father. Concert? Pa? Impossible to believe, even more impossible while it was actually happening. But I saw it with my own eyes. Pa gamely nodding to the beat and tapping his foot. If you want my future, forget my past. If you want to get with me, better make it fast. After, on the way out, there were more flashes. This time, the Spice Girls weren't there to deflect any of the attention. It was just Pa and me. I reached for him, grabbed his hand, hung on. I recall, bright as the flashes, loving him, needing him. The next morning, Pa and I went to a beautiful lodge on a snaky river, KwaZulu Nathan, KwaZulu Natal. Pardon me. I knew about this place where redcoats and Zulu warriors clashed in the summer of 1879. I'd heard all the stories, legends, and I'd seen the movie Zulu countless times. But now I was going to become a bona fide expert, Pa said. He had arranged for us to sit on camp chairs before a log fire and listen to a world famous historian, David Rattray, recreate the battle. It might have been the first lecture to which I ever really paid attention. The men who fought on this ground, Mr. Rattray said, were heroes, on both sides heroes. The Zulus were ferocious, utter wizards with a short spear known as the Ixlua, which was named for the sucking sound it made when pulled from a victim's chest. And yet, a mere 150 British soldiers on hand managed to hold off 4,000 Zulus, and that improbable stand, called Rorke's Drift, instantly became part of British mythology. 11 soldiers were awarded the Victoria Cross, the greatest number ever won in one battle by a single regiment. Another two soldiers, Another two soldiers who held off the Zulus one day before Rorke's Drift became the first to win the Victoria Cross posthumously. Posthumously, Pa? Here, yes. What does it mean? After what? Died, darling boy. Though a source of pride for many Britons, Rorke's Drift was the outgrowth of imperialism, colonialism, nationalism, in short, theft. Great Britain was trespassing, invading a sovereign nation, and trying to steal it, meaning the precious blood of Britain's finest lads had been wasted that day. In the eyes of some, among them Mr. Rattray, he didn't glide over such difficult facts. When necessary, he condemned the British roundly. Locals called him the White Zulu, but I was too young. I heard him and also didn't hear him. Very, Laurie, very, very interesting book. I love it. I'm loving it. I'm loving it. Let's continue. When necessary, he condemned the British roundly. Locals called him the White Zulu, but I was too young. I heard him and also didn't. Maybe I'd seen the movie Zulu too many times. Maybe I'd waged too many pretend battles with my toy redcoats. I had I had a view of battle, of Britain, which didn't permit new facts. So I zoomed in on the bits about manly courage and British power, and when I should have been horrified, I was inspired. On the way home, I told myself the whole trip had been a smash. Not only a terrific adventure, but a bonding experience with Pa. Surely life would now be altogether different. Most of my teachers were kind souls who just let me be, who understood all that I was dealing with and didn't want to give me more. Mr. Dawson, who played the organ in the chapel, were extremely gentle. Mr. Little, the drum teacher, was exceedingly patient. Confined to a wheelchair, he had turned up for drum lessons in his van, and it would take us forever to get him out of the van and into the classroom. And then we'd have to leave enough time to get him back into the van after the lesson. So we'd never have more than 20 minutes of actual teaching. I didn't mind, and in return, Mr. Little didn't ever complain that my drumming wasn't really improving. Some teachers, however, gave me no quarter, like my history teacher, Mr. Hughes Games. Day and night, from Mr. Hughes Games' bungalow beside the sports fields, came the shrill yelps of his pointers, Tusker and Bede. They were beautiful, spotted, gray-eyed, and Mr. Hughes Games cherished them as children. He kept several framed photos of them on his desk, which was one reason many boys thought Mr. Hughes Games a tad eccentric. So it came as a roaring shock when I realized that Mr. Hughes Games believed me to be the odd one. That what could be odder, he said to me one day, than a British prince not knowing British history. I cannot fathom it. Wales, we are talking about your blood relatives. Does that mean nothing to you? Less than nothing, sir. It wasn't just that I didn't know anything about my family's history. I didn't want to know anything. I liked British history in theory. I found certain bits intriguing. I knew a few things about the signing of the Magna Carta, for instance, June of 1215 at Rummymede, but that was because I'd once glimpsed the place where it happened through the window of Pa's car, right by the river. Looked beautiful, perfect spot to establish peace, I thought. But micro details about the Norman conquest, or the ins and outs of the beef between Henry VIII and the Pope, or the differences between the First and Second Crusades. Please. It all came to a head one day when Mr. Hughes Games was talking about Charles Edward Stuart, or Charles III, as he thought of himself, pretending to the throne, pretender to the throne. Mr. Hughes Games had strong opinions about the fellow. While he shared them with us in a hot rage, I stared at my pencil and tried not to fall asleep. Suddenly, Mr. Hughes Games stopped and posited a question about Charles's life. The answer was a cinch. If you had done the reading, no one had. Wales, you must know this. Da 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 da. Why must I? Because it's your family. Laughter. I dropped my head. The other boys knew I was royal, of course. If they forgot for half a second, my omnipresent bodyguard, armed and ununiformed police catchers across the grounds, would be more than happy to remind them. But did Mr. Hughes Games need to shout it from the rooftops? Did he need to use that loaded word, family? My family had declared me a nullity, the spare. I didn't complain about it, but I didn't need to dwell on it either. Far better, in my mind, not to think about certain facts, such as the cardinal rule for royal travel. Pa and William could never be on the same flight together. Okay, you all understood that. They couldn't be on the same flight together just in case tragedy happened. The two of them couldn't go together. Pa and William could never be on the same flight together because there must be no chance of the first and second in the line of the throne being wiped out. But no one gave a damn whom I traveled with. The spear could always be spared. I knew this, knew my place. So why go out of my way to study it? Why memorize the names of the past peers? What was the sense of that? More, why trace my family tree when all tracery led to the same severed branch? Mummy. After class, I went up to Mr. Hughes Gabe's desk and asked him to please stop. Stop what, Wales? Embarrassing me, sir. His eyebrows flew up to his hairline like startled birds. I argued that it would be cruel to single out any other boy the way you did me. To ask any other student at Ludgrove such pointed questions about their great-great-great-grand whatever. Mr. Hughes Games harrupled and snuffled. He had overstepped his bounds, he knew it, but he was stubborn. It's good for you, Wells. The more I call on you, the more you will learn. Days later, however, at the start of class, Mr. Hughes Games made a proffer of peace. Magna Carta style, he presented me with one of those wooden rulers engraved along both sides with the names of every British monarch since Harold in 1016. Rulers, get it? The royal line, inch by inch, right up to Granny. He said I could keep it at my desk, refer to it as I needed. Gosh, I said, thank you. All right, guys, that's going to be it for this morning. That's as much as I'm going to read for today. We are going to be continuing the reading of this book. You know, whatever I read, you read. Whatever I read for you. All right, guys. And somebody said in the chat that they could do or whatever. I have been reading books, and even though I know Harry's is probably is of course the most high profile book I've read. I mean, I've read other books. I mean, YouTube haven't said anything. So when they do, I will learn from it. But thanks for that. Thanks for the heads up. Thanks for letting me know. Yeah. Yes, guys. So that's going to be it for the reading for today for the book Spare by Prince Harry. Come back again tomorrow, maybe, or I might read for another hour and put it on a live that you all can go back to and listen to it. But for today, for right now, that is going to be it. I hope you all enjoy the reading as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. Thank you so much, my friends, for stopping by, for stopping in. All the newbies and all of my friends here, Beth Waugh, It's Lori, the amazing M&G, my darling, she stole my thunder. And we had somebody new here, said he was from Turkey, Shabihan. Thank you so much for stopping by. We appreciate you. My sister Irene was here. My darling Winsome was here as well. And Ajabu, my darling Ajabu, and my love Joseph was here. Ah, Joe. What's up, Joe? Joe was here as usual. I sincerely appreciate each and every one of you. The lovely Ricky. Ricky was here as well. I'm trying to see, make sure I don't miss anybody. The amazing M&G, my dear sister, was here. And also Evelyn. Guys, if there's anybody who came into the chat you have not yet connected with, go ahead and connect with them. I sincerely appreciate each and every one of you. Thanks again so much for coming in and sharing with me this morning. That's going to be it from me for today, my friends. Until next time, this is Trev from Trevessence, where your journey matters. Have yourselves a great Friday, guys.